Hey everybody, in today's video I'm going to be just giving some musings on the topic of wall generals. It's a conversation that comes up quite often. I was doing a consultation for somebody, I don't remember what server, but a fairly new server, and they were asking, of course, like many people do, what wall generals should I be trying to get? What are the best wall generals? And that's a pretty loaded question. There's going to be people out there that say the best wall general is this, the best assistant wall general is this. And I'm not going to say that they're wrong or that they're right, because they could be, and they could be either way. They could be right or wrong. It's a very situational thing. What is considered the best for you and your setup is not going to be the same as somebody else. It doesn't mean that there aren't specific top generals that are more suited for wall and different defensive setups than others. Absolutely. But it's really hard to say what the best is. And we're going to look at a couple examples and ideas around this so you can try to find the right pick for you. And it's not necessarily based on money and availability, because even if you don't spend on the game, you could get lucky and you can get stuff, right? But we will think about long term, and we will think about server age and troop composition and that sort of thing in this video. So bear with me. I'm going to take this in detail because this is more of a beginner kind of player video, so it kind of goes a little more in depth into my reasoning and my thinking here. So bear with me as we go along. So let me first take a look at an older server like my own. This server right here is server 40, and server 40 merged with 82, and then 4082 merged with 122. So we have three servers, the oldest of which is server 40, which, I mean, you consider how many servers there are now. I mean, geez, I don't even know where it's at. Like, look at all this. Look at this garbage. I mean, this is just too much, and that's not even halfway down the list. Where are we? Let's go. 11. All right, so we are at 1168. Is that right? Or are there some more here? Yeah, there are more. Of course, there's always more. 1182. Like, 1182. And it just maddens me. It makes me so angry because all these ones here that look like, oh, look, there's all these ones that every single server says hot. Like, oh, it's a hot server. There are so many people on this server. Join now. And like, no. Half these servers are dead or dying. That's actually a low figure. All of these servers are dead or dying. That's just what it is. If you're not a new server, you are dead or dying. And that's just the way that this game works. And it's such a shame. So I don't know why they say hot. They should just say dying. Anyway, mini rant over. So in the grand scheme of things, when we're at 1182 servers, server 40 is one of the very first servers out. And I think it was in the first 2 weeks of the game's launch that server 40 launched. That's how old this server is. So the median age of or the median power of a keep on this server is significantly higher than something even a couple hundred server numbers beyond this. So if you look at 500, you look at 700, the numbers that you see on my server are going to be significantly different unless they merged with some earlier servers. All right. That's not to say that there aren't big spenders that can grow huge in short amounts of time. Absolutely. But I'm talking about like the average size of a keep on my server is going to be quite a bit higher than most. Let's take a look at that so you can have an idea. And I'll just go into the rankings here. Monarch Power rankings. The top player right now on our server is 15 billion, which is by no means the highest in the game, but that's a pretty big number. And you look down, top 10, 6 billion. And you see that like after about like 8 billion, there's a lot of people in that range. Like these are all really close numbers. 4.9, 4.9, 4.8, 4.6, 4.5. Like, people are really close together. So there's a lot of fluctuation. You go all the way down to 50. Let's see where the 1 billion starts, actually. 1 billion starts at 64. And you should probably realize that a lot of the people down here that we're looking at are inactive or dead, or, you know, yeah, they still have troops and stuff, but they're probably somebody's alt at this point. Because the server has long been dying. I mean, it's an old server. We've been dying forever. So you look at a server like mine. A server like mine, people have a lot of troops. I have 4.8 billion power. I haven't changed in a long time, but I have a lot of troops compared to people on newer servers. So if you look at my troops and you were a newer server dealing with somebody like me, you would see these troops and you'd be like, oh, how are we going to rally this? Okay. Servers that I compete against are just like, oh, let's throw a quick archer at him and wipe him out in one shot, because that's the competition that I have. But if I was on a newer server with this amount of troops, people would be struggling figuring out what to do here, because it's a matter of filling rallies. So what would you do? Well, I don't have a lot of tier 14 siege. I have quite a bit at tier 13 siege. So what would usually happen to an account like mine if it was in a PvP situation like Battlefield, where they weren't just an overpowering alliance, is they would probably throw some siege at me first, like a tier 11 siege, try to whittle down my tier 14 and tier 13s so that there's not a lot of defense. Then they might throw an archer at me to get rid of cavalry, or they might do an archer in the first place to try to get rid of cavalry. And then after that, they might try, if they were successful in wiping out all my cavalry, they might try ground to get rid of my archers. And then after that, they hopefully, the other variation here is, once they've gotten rid of that, they might sacrifice a cavalry rally and try to get rid of ground. There's a couple of different variations there. But the point is, it will take several rallies, right? And one of the leading ways to do that is to get rid of the siege. So, as a defender, what I'm really focusing on a server like mine are certain stats. Let me go to my crappy wall general. No, it's not Shajar, but my assistant definitely is. She is a beast. You can't access the general from here? That's so stupid. Why am I not surprised? All right, military wall general, where are you? George Dewey. Okay, so the reason I have Dewey, number one, because he's available to me. I managed to pick him up. He was there, right? But before he became really good, or considered to be really good, I had picked him up. So it was a lucky win-win, and then he became very popular after as well. So looking at Dewey, his main skill here is in-city mounted troop HP by 15%. Mounted HP on defense, if you have a lot of cavalry, is essential. You have to have really high mounted troop HP, or else you're very vulnerable to archer rallies. I mean, even with high HP, you're vulnerable to archer rallies, but you're a little more solid in defending. Like you're harder to hit if you have higher HP. He also increases in-city range troop and siege machine attack by 20%. Like, I don't care so much about the range troop, but the siege machine attack is helpful as well on defense, because when I get those siege rallies, I want to make sure that my siege are taking out as much as possible so that I'm not losing as much, right? And there's a lot of factors that matter, like, how many layers being sent at you and that sort of thing. But siege machine attack is not a bad thing to have at all. And it's not that the range troop isn't important too. It's just I find that range troops on defense don't get as much value as they do on offense for some reason. On the other hand, for me, I find that ground troops get a lot of value on defense. So those are some of my thoughts there. Because of my server, I know I'm going to get sieged. At least I'm talking if I was against opponents that couldn't crush me instantly in one hit. That's what I'd be facing. I'd be facing Siege. So that's why I have Dewey, all right? Also, Dewey is ascendable pretty easily because I can get copies of him. I probably have like 10 copies of him that I could use. I just haven't ascended him. Now, those are some good reasons for Dewey. But if I was on a newer server, I wouldn't do that. And I'll explain why when I get to some newer servers. Yeah, you can look at like specialty and stuff too, like some range troop, siege machine attack. It's all good stuff. It is. But it would not be my focus if I was on a newer server at all. Okay, and so that's what I mean. Like, and similarly, it would not be my focus if I didn't have a significant amount of those troops to make it worthwhile. Don't just go for the quote best general pick because you heard it was the best. Go with what is the best for you. Let's move on. Let's talk about a mid-range server. So that was a pretty old server. Let's look at something that is mid-range. I'm going to go and I'm going to see if I can like pick some random server. These are all pretty old. Let's go to a mid-range server, which is probably about, yeah, somewhere around here. I mean, you'd call them new servers-ish because they weren't that long ago. But like I said, if you're not the brand new server, you're already dying. So you're considered a mid-range server. So let's see. Let's go to 872. Yes, I want to visit you. Well, okay, who's here? Death Valley. All right, we're going to scroll around, see if we can find some people. Can I don't think I can check their rankings, can I? Yeah, that's I feel like that's such a flaw. Like, I'd like to be able to go to another map and check people's rankings. If I'm on that map, show me their rankings, and give me a button to go home if I want. You know, some of the simple logic, you think, right? Okay, come on. Where are all you people? Is this a dead server too? I mean, yeah, of course it is. It's not new. Where are all the keeps? Okay, here's an alliance. Huh, FKN, interesting. Doesn't seem like a very big one. There's a couple people in here that are 35, 36. Not massive, but... All right, so let's look at the biggest person I can find. Let's look at this guy, or this gal. 3.5 billion power, probably considered one of the biggest people on the server, my guess. Okay, I can't really check, but just by the short looking around, that's what I would guess. Excuse me. So, on a server like this, you look at an alliance like this. If an alliance like this is, where did they go? Apologies, guys, I'm sick. All right, so there they are. So a server like this, you look around, they don't have a lot of big people. And if that Keep 36 is 3.5 billion, is probably one of the bigger ones. We've got a 35 here, 1.3. We've got, I saw another 35 somewhere. Here we go, 35, 1.4. Huh? 37? What? Oh, that's a name. You got me confused. What? That's interesting. So, you know, these numbers are not really high. These players you can see are average 1 billion on the high end. And then there's a couple that are bigger. So if they are in Battlefield and they are trying to set up a rally, they don't have the troops to really, I mean, even a player my size, they would struggle to zero me. They would struggle because it would mean they would need to fill 5 6, 7 rallies because they just don't have the power. It would be really, really tough for them. And I don't think, looking at their roster, that they could actually fill that many rallies to wipe me out. There's a couple players on there, potentially, that if they had incredible buffs from really crazy Civ gear that are significantly higher than my own, that could do damage, absolutely. So it's possible, but it would be an extreme challenge for them. But that's just because I'm on a way older server. So if I was on a server that was similar to their own, so this is what, like 8 server, what was it? 872. So if I was on 873, for example, and I'm competing against these guys in Battlefield, and you look at the average player size, 1 billion, should I be really focused on getting a wall general like not Johnson, he's not Johnson, Dewey? Should I really be focused on that and working up my siege attack? And no, nobody is going to send a siege rally at you if you're 1 billion power. There's no point. I mean, these days, even on newer or the older servers, like you see in the All-Stars, people getting zeroed at 15 billion power from just these massive, massive rallies. Who needs to siege? The only ones that would actually need to worry about that stuff are the very, very big players where the opponent is going to be whittling them down. So a general like Dewey on a server like this, probably not worth the time yet. You're just not at that point yet, right? You probably want to focus more on what's going to bring a lot of value. So what's going to bring a lot of value is improving things like your ground and your mounted HP and that sort of thing. That you'll get more immediate value. So you should focus on generals like Leonidas, for example, or as a free-to-play example, maybe even Trajan. To have Trajan as a free-to-play example on your wall temporarily, you'll get a lot more value than you would from not Joseph Johnson. I keep saying it. Why did they change that anyway? God. Than Dewey, realistically. But it also matters on troop composition, right? Like if you have a lot of archers and you don't have a lot of other troops and your buffs are just geared more towards archers, you're going to get more value from an archer-specific general than you would from a ground. However, like I did say, I find that ground is a lot beefier on defense, and if you have really strong ground as opposed to really strong archers, you're going to be more successful, generally. Everything has a weakness, but ground are like meat shields, and they tend to last a little longer, just in my experience. Let's look at an extremely new server. So there's only 1 or 2 extremely new servers. Everything else is dying or dead. So let's go over to the newest ones. If you're over here on an extremely new server, then yeah, Throne isn't even activated. Like everybody's brand new. So what kind of wall general should you be worried about building up? Nothing, really, because everybody's level 9. But let's say in the future when you get to like 25, 30, whatever, and you're starting to think about really defending and really being competitive, in that sort of a situation, you know that if you make it there as one of the first players and people are still lagging behind, then you need to just focus on what is going to bring you the most value. And I would think probably long term. I would, if you're a spender, you're going to want to probably grab a nice assistant general. Like I really like Leonidas, so I'll give that as another example. Pick him up and work on his specialty, because he could be swapped as the assistant for whoever you want long term. So where is Leonidas? He's Europe. And there are many, many options like this, but I'm just trying to give like a generalized kind of an idea. So Leonidas, as an assistant, even if you're not a heavy spender, he would provide attack and HP of in-city ground troops and in-city ranged attack by 25%. So he's really solid. So something like that improves your ground and has other benefits too, and provides really good numbers. Like look at these specialties. You wouldn't ascend him because that would be very costly, but as a general that could be fully specialized as an assistant, I'd probably focus more on that, because I know I'm going to keep him regardless of whatever I change the main one to be. Now the main one, I would, if I was looking on a very new server, what I would do is I would start with something that's affordable, that I can get quickly, that I can possibly convert later. So let's see, people tend to build a lot of archers first and a lot of ground. So probably something to focus on that. Oh, and cavalry as well, but I wouldn't really focus on that. So William Marshall is a very common choice. You could go with William Marshall. Where is William Marshall? Is he Europe? Yeah. So he's right here. In-city ground troop and mounted troop HP by 20%. Those are excellent stats. And then you have in-city range and siege attack by 20%. They're good. Not as useful in the short term, but they're great. And he could be a long-term general. Absolutely, he's very solid. But like I said, he's kind of one just like Dewey, that is more geared towards being in a really big alliance, really competitive. If you're not that might not be the right choice for you. You got to really think about your own troop composition and your enemies before you really make a solid choice. So really keep these kind of tips in mind, because it really changes a lot. There are so many choices out there. You don't want to just go with whatever's the cookie cutter thing, because what's right on server 40 is not necessarily what's right on server 872 or 1182. You got to think about you got to think about your opponents, and you have to improve on your weaknesses. For a wall general, you want to be very well rounded and focus on the areas that will get the most impact. And on a newer server, that's not going to be siege attack. It'll probably be more ground buffs and mounted HP. So keep those things in mind. That's about it for this video. It's a little longer than I was expecting, but I thought it was an interesting question, and I'd share that with you. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in a future video.